let's look then, shall we, at how Labour reacted to their win last night.
Wow, you know, what a result. I think of all the elections in our Isle's long history, this is the second biggest swing there's ever been. So we were feeling increasingly upbeat as the campaign went on, but I never saw that sort of victory coming. I mean, we're just blown away.
Henry, I'll start with you. What did you make to the election? And I will be putting the results up on the screen as well. We will recap everybody's memory. But what was your kind of key takeaway from the events of last night, early hours this morning?
Well, I disagree. Labour didn't win it. The Conservatives lost it.
Right.
Both of them. And there was a much, much smaller turnout, lower turnout than in 2019. And my takeaway from this is that there are a whole lot of tens of thousands of people out there who are politically homeless. They don't want to vote Conservative at the moment. They don't see any reason to, but they don't want to vote for anybody else either. Now, I think, you know, the takeaway here is that between now and the general election, if you replicate that across all constituencies, there is a very large group of people who their votes are there to be won. And by any party, if they meet if they provide a vision and a plan for the country that's convincing and actually stands out in terms of leadership above what all the parties are presently offering. Labour did not do any better in these by-elections than they did in the election in 2019. The Conservatives did far worse. And I think on reform, I think they did as pretty much as predicted. And actually, we've demonstrated this, they've demonstrated during these two by-elections that they will enable a greater victory by Labour in the next general election, if indeed nothing else changes in British politics in the meantime.
Joe Phillips, what do you think?
Well, I slightly agree with Henry, actually, to a certain extent, that, you know, the results were not a surprise, and the next general election, whenever it comes, is Labour's to lose. And I think it's really important to remember that although we're talking about a swing, it wasn't so much a swing to Labour as a swing away from the Conservative Party. That figure of 13,000-odd votes in Wellingborough, I think, is not very different to what it was in 2019 at the last election. But if you've only got a 31% turnout, that shows you...
But you had a 38 and a 37%.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's minuscule.
Yeah, it's tiny, tiny, tiny. But, you know, that is often the case with by-elections. The Kingswood seat is going to be abolished under the new boundary changes come the next election. So whoever had won is only going to be an MP for a matter of months. So I think, you know, there are several takeaways. One is that Labour have still got work to do to persuade the people who didn't come out to actually vote for them, as opposed to voting against the Conservatives. And I think reform is interesting because they've knocked the Lib Dems and the Greens, you know, way down the list. And I suspect that there will be calls from reform, as there have been from other parties over the years, for proportional representation, because I think people really need to feel that their vote counts. And if you're voting and you'll get, you know, you've got 10% of the vote or 15% of the vote or whatever it is, whether you're Green, Lib Dem, SNP, Plaid Cymru, whatever, people have really got to feel that their vote counts, because otherwise...
But it's not going to happen, though, this... you're not going to get another referendum, are you? Because to pass that, basically, Labour or whoever it's going to be that wins the next election, they're going to have to go, OK, guys, we'll allow a referendum on this. But they're going to be the victims of it. Well, so it's like would-be turkeys voting for Christmas, basically.
Labour have actually now said, although they wouldn't put it in a manifesto, they have come round to it. I mean, my own view
Come off it. If they were serious about it, why would you not put it in your manifesto, then?
Well, they haven't written their manifesto yet.
Do you think it would be in that manifesto?
No, I don't.
In fact, actually, I'm saying would it be in the manifesto? Manifestos are about as much use as I don't know what, chocolate fire gas.
Well,
people don't stick to what's in them anyway.
I mean, who reads them apart from political geeks? Nobody particularly.
It's part of the problem, the manifestos, because and part of the reason that the public no longer trust politicians. They are asked to vote for a political party on the basis of a manifesto, which they, up until well, they've kept being optimistic, the electorate, hoping that the manifesto is actually a plan for government. But actually, then it gets pretty much abandoned the moment a party comes into power. Yeah. It is, and those parties that, such as Reform, who actually, let's be frank, are never going to form the government. Certainly not after the next general election. Their manifesto. It's very easy to say we would do this, and this, and make it very appealing without having the responsibility of actually having to deliver it. Well,
I heard a Tory MP at lunchtime saying, well, we've got the message from the by-elections and we're really going to we're going to see changes to fix things. And you think, you've had 14 years. It shouldn't take these 2 by-elections on top of all the other by-elections that they've lost to actually get on with the job that they're supposed to be doing. I think they're done for.
Alan, one of my viewers, Alan, says, can I just say, Ben Habib is talking about, did really well in his view in Wellingborough. Long live the Reform Party, he says. Well, let's have a listen to Ben Habib. He was reflecting after the vote. Listen.
Well, what I would have liked is to win. By the way, I'm not tired at all. I'm top of the pops, as I said. We've done really well. Look at Reform. Reform is an insurgency. It's a new business, isn't it? We started 3 years ago. 3 months ago, we did 5% in Tamworth, slightly less than that in mid-Bedfordshire. Today, we've done 10% in Kingswood, where people were saying we're going to lose our deposit. We've done 13% here, which is more than our national polling. This is a staging post in the growth of Reform UK's recognition, in the growth of people's understanding of what we stand for.
I mean, you've got to admire his energy. I dread to think what time of the day that was, or early hours, or early morning. But yeah, he was full of beans. That is, of course, Ben Habib, or the housewife's favourite, as I like to call him, when he's on this programme.
We miss him, don't we, Michelle?
Well, yeah, but them's the rules. You can't have people that are campaigning in a by-election on the screen. I've got to say as well, a lot of people are saying, actually, that the Tories didn't do as badly as some had expected. Some people were saying that, actually, they really were going to be kind of knocked out of the park. But actually, in Wellingborough, they got 25% of the vote. Kingswood, 35% of the vote. Not to be sniffed at.
I don't see that the Conservatives could have done any worse, to be quite honest, except had those 2019 Tory voters voted for Reform, which they didn't, or not most of them stayed at home. And actually, I'm going to disagree with Ben. Ben fought a by-election actually was probably the best option available for Reform. He was on good ground, very firm ground for gaining a vote. He said it's above the national average, but yes, that's to be expected from a constituency that was a very, very staunch Brexit constituency. And it's not quite true, and I don't mean to dish Reform, but let's talk about the reality of it. Reform is an evolution. It's come out of the Brexit Party. The Brexit Party came out of UKIP. There has been a constituency there, if you like, of support for the sort of politics that UKIP used to deliver. I'm not saying they do now, because they don't, that the Brexit Party delivered, and now Reform. So there is a continuity there. They've changed their names, they've changed some of their personalities, but actually, essentially, they've got the same support base. And I think that support, they're going to have a great deal of difficulty in building that support base further. And I think we will see in the general election not a big shift to Reform any further than we've seen in these by-elections, but a continuation of the Conservatives not turning out. We will see a low turnout unless the Conservatives, and I do think there is an opportunity for them to change course. There is. Will they? I doubt it very much. Could they? Yes, 100% they could. Would that involve changing the captain of the ship? Probably. Time is very short. So I don't think they will do it, but I think they could do it.
Would not put up with that. I mean, it would be utterly...
with what?
Having another change of leader.
But they're on course to hit a bloody great iceberg at the moment.
Yeah,
the captain of the ship refuses to change
what
course.
They have
so
to do...
what do? They either go full steam into that iceberg, or they try to change course. And if that requires a change of captain, you've got to remove the captain to change course, then that maybe is what they have to do.
But you know as well as I do, Henry, over the weekend the papers will be full of analysis. They'll be picking over the bones of these elections. They'll be asking all of those questions that we're talking about tonight. But what the Tory party has done since the beginning of Brexit, if you like, and UKIP before that, was they have moved further and further to the right. Now, whether the Tory party splits and those who are to the further of the right join Reform, which may happen, may not happen, and whether the rump of the Tory party goes back to its sort of older, more patrician values, if you like, more centre ground, because there are a lot of Conservative voters, particularly the sort of not older people, but sort of middle-aged people who can see that their kids can't get on the housing ladder. They know they can't get dental appointments. They know that the fabric and the infrastructure of the country is broken.
Indeed.
Who are not the Conservative voters who would necessarily go for the Miriam Cates or the Suella Braverman, who are the siren voices
I agree,
of the right.
but I'm going to disagree with you slightly, Jo, because
Only
when we say that the Conservative Party has moved right, in what time frame? Because if you take the David Cameron era, absolutely it's moved further right. But David Cameron was very firmly on the centre ground. And actually, I think if you go back to the more traditional Conservative Party of the 20s, the 30s, and so on, you're actually talking about a Conservative Party that was putting Britain first, putting British interests and the interests of the British people first. It's about the ascendancy of Great Britain in the world. It was about, actually still at that time, it was about bringing the working class into it. If you think, you know, the old school, I'm going back many, many, many years now, working class were actually largely Conservative voters. So because they saw that they wanted to be proud, patriotic Brits. So the Conservative Party has moved from there to the centre ground, and I think now there is an effort to pull it back. Tony Blair very effectively moved Labour onto the centre ground. David Cameron was quite open about his admiration for Tony Blair, moved the Conservative Party to that centre ground as well. There are still Conservatives who are on, they call themselves the moderates. I don't agree with that phrase at all. They are the centrists, they're the liberals within the Conservative Party who argue that the only way to win an election is to go for the centre ground. Well, everybody's fighting for the centre ground. The disenfranchised people, or the people who don't have a voice, are the people who are saying, yes, we can't get housing because there's a massive problem with immigration. We need to stop the immigration. We need to bring back firm policing. We need to bring back efficient justice. We need to sort our prisons out. We need to sort our education system out. And we don't see the Conservatives delivering on that. It's the woke agenda that's being produced.
Well, woke agenda is just a phrase. It is utterly meaningless. What we actually need is investment in public services, and for 14 years we've had no investment, and that's why so much of what we expect and what we pay taxes for is completely and utterly broken.
Why do you say that the work agenda is not a thing?
I think it's a very easy way to criticise anything and anybody who seems to think that, you know, we can move on, perhaps. We could move on from not you and I going into a garage and not having to see a topless woman behind a packet of peanuts on a calendar.
No, but I think there'd be a lot of people out there watching or listening to this perhaps that absolutely does think that there is a work agenda going on. They would point to actual tangible things. They would say, for example, all of these kind of, this obsession with diversity, not to the point of kind of equal opportunity, because I completely agree with that. Everyone should get access to the same opportunities and should be treated fairly and respectfully with dignity and all the rest of it. But people would argue about engineered equality of outcome. That's not necessarily always the right thing. People would talk about this whole notion that seems to have just crept in without challenge into discourse and into educational settings, that biological men, can become biological women. That just seems to, I don't know how that's even, we've got to the point where that is not laughed at, actually, quite frankly. It's not true.
You know, there are some things, and you're right, Michelle, there are some things that are absolutely extreme, and there are some companies and organisations that have milked it and manipulated things like diversity without stopping to think about it. But if you think about something like mental health, for instance, you know, lots of people will poo-poo the idea that we shouldn't be talking to men about mental health. 600 people who work in the construction industry committed suicide last year.
Yeah, well, actually, suicide is the biggest cause of death, I think, for men. Is it under 50? Is that the stat now? But I know it's a huge figure, isn't it?